All right, so I'm getting ready to fire a saw up for the first time. Again, we built this saw once before. She popped, and we got her built again. Now, I had stolen a few parts off of this build for other projects, so I'm actually missing some air filter pieces to be able to actually take it to wood. But that's pretty much it, really. I need the elbow, the air filter elbow. Once I get that, I can, throw an air filter on it and we can take it to the wood. I thought, I wasn't thinking, the carburetor, you know how the bolt holes go sideways or diagonal or whatever? I have mismatched parts on here, so everything's kind of out of whack. Good enough to start, but I'm gonna have to get some parts to make it correct before we can take it to wood. So let's go ahead and start her up. Dolmar, it's a 7300 that I converted to a 7900 and ported it. I did not go wild this time, wild and crazy, a little more conservative, and just should be a strong little runner. So let's fire it up and see how she runs. It's funny how I say let's just fire it up, because hey, she may not fire up. You know what I mean? There's always that possibility. So stuff here, I don't want it to fall. The choke does not work correctly. The throttle lock does not work correctly. She's struggling to return to idle because the cable's kind of screwed up. We've got some issues here we're gonna have to take care of. But for now, we should be able to fire it. Let's see what happens. Well, she's running like it has an air leak at the intake, which I'm not surprised. I got such a hodgepodge of parts, used parts, and that intake boot looked kind of rough when I put it on. And whenever I tightened the screws up for the carb, I didn't like the way it felt. I don't know. I think there's an ear leak at the intake. Probably gonna work at replacing a lot of that stuff before I take it to wood. But, she's running. We just gotta do some stuff here. It was impossible to try to tune. It wouldn't. I was trying to throw as much fuel as I could to try to bring the idle down, and it just, yeah, definitely feels like an air leak. And I'm pretty certain it's in the intake just because of how much of a hodgepodge of parts it is. And a lot of them are pretty rough looking and stuff. I had stolen the parts for other projects, so now it's a matter of getting this one up and running good. I have a big air filter set up on everything for this saw that I will be putting on it. And I'm probably going to get a different carburetor. I picked this carb up for it, and it's one of the ones with the holes are diagonal, and I need one where the holes are flat across. I wasn't thinking about that. Or, yeah, I need basically a 372 carb. This is not a 372 carb. The choke leakage won't work because of how the choke, or I don't know, the choke leakage on this thing will not work at all. So I got to get a different setup on it. And a 372 carb is like a direct replacement. So that's what we're going to do. We're probably going to buy a new intake, carburetor, everything, and throw that on this saw to get her, that should get her up and running better. We'll see how she goes. That's kind of what I've been working on all day today. Well, not all day, but off and on. Just getting that thing back to running condition. As far as the port work's concerned, I did not get real crazy with it. The exhaust port is not widened a whole lot because of how the piston is. It's a winded piston, and I couldn't widen it a whole lot or I would be free porting. So I kind of went a little taller than normal, a little more duration than what I normally do. So we'll see how she ends up in the end, you know what I mean? Well, that's it for that project. I think I'm going to jump on to something else here. Don't know what it is, but you're going to find out in a second, right? Now, I just did 2 videos on this saw and talking about how it just can't get it to wind out in the RPM. All right, so I think we figured out what's going on. We're going to kind of go over that. So it's a combination of 2 things, it looks like. So on gas, it will rev out, and that's without the expansion chamber. So it'll rev out without the expansion chamber on gas better than it will on alcohol. And what I'm finding is that it's starving. So as it tries to go higher in RPM, it basically starts starving for fuel to keep those RPMs going. And that would be in the port work. I think it's actually in the transfers. So I'm not transferring enough fuel at high RPM for alcohol, and it's basically starving out on me. So I can't get it to rev higher in the RPM. Now it kind of works right now because of this expansion chamber, because the expansion chamber is tuned to operate at 1 RPM, and basically 1 RPM specifically, and that is low enough in which the saw will perform. So like the saw itself is capable of turning higher RPM and stuff, but it's whenever I put the expansion chamber and stuff, so the expansion chamber is kind of holding it down to a lower RPM, you know. So it's kind of working out because of that. So what I'm going to have to do is redesign a whole new expansion chamber for the kind of RPM I'm hoping to achieve, which I think my goal is going to be about 13.5. And I'm going to have to do something to the port work to get it to rev out like that and be able to supply enough fuel at 13.5 at the transfers. So it's going to be a combination of a little bit wider and a little bit more duration. If I remember correctly, we're sitting at a 94-degree exhaust roof, but the transfers are sitting at like 124-ish. They could even further. It could be like 126, somewhere in there. I think we're going to have to bump that up closer to like 120. And I think, yeah, probably around 120, maybe even 118, but I'm thinking around 120 degrees that transfers, and that should help it rev out a little higher for that alcohol, because she's starving out. I think she's a little short on duration for the kind of RPM I'm trying to achieve, and the expansion chamber just isn't designed to operate at that RPM. So we're going to have to probably rebuild a whole new expansion chamber for it. But in the meantime, I'm completely fine running it as is. It runs great. No issues whatsoever. She's pulling the 10 pins, and all that stuff. And it probably has enough power to go bigger on the sprocket. So, I'm fine running it as is. Those will be some tweaks we do down the road to try to get some more RPM out of it. But just thought I'd get you an update there. I think I figured out what's going on. I need a little more transfer timing, and I need to put a different expansion chamber altogether in order to get the expansion chamber tuned to the RPM range that I'm looking for. This expansion chamber seems to be tuned for right around 12,000 RPM. And we got to do something there to get that up. You know what I mean? I have a computer program. I'm going to have to dive into it and figure it out for the expansion chamber. But we're probably going to have to build one from scratch. Now, I'm getting ready to make a chain video. So previously, I made a video on chain, and I modified the right-hand side cutter of the chain. to see if that would cause the chain to cut crooked and let us go faster. So in the comments, there was kind of a discussion going on how it almost seemed like it was working backwards from what it should have. Like almost like it slowed the right side cutter down. And I was thinking it was the other way around. I was thinking because made the modifications to the right side cutter, it would help it pull through the wood faster, causing it to cut right. And some folks were thinking it should be the other way around. So I was going to do a test, or I'm getting ready to do a test. We're going to do a video testing a chain. And basically I'm going to make a cut, and then I'm going to come through and with a flat file and just scratch the corner on either the left side or the right side of the chain to see if the saw wants to cut left or right. Now, after I've been thinking about this a bit, I think that's going to give us a false result, but we're going to make the video anyway. The reason is because we're going to be affecting the sharpness of the chain. And before, the way it happened, we were not affecting the sharpness of the chain. So by me filing on the corners of the tooth to intentionally dull it, we are technically going to affect how sharp the chain is on one side. So we might actually see an opposite results of what I actually had previously. I think that they might be flip-flop. The reason is because the modifications I made on the chain to the right side cutter was to help it clear chips. And, I made the modification to the right side cutter and it ended up steering right. And, thinking, if you think about that, the right side should actually cut faster and the saw should actually steer left. And so in a way, you would think that actually slowed her down. I think the reason I'm wrong here is not because of the sharpness of the chain. I don't think that's what's at play here, because the modification happened on the back side of the tooth. So technically that doesn't affect how sharp the tooth is at all. And I think this test we're getting ready to do will not be an accurate representation because of that. I think the modifications I made to help clear chips made it easier for the tooth behind it to cut. So by clearing chips better off of the right side tooth, the one behind it, which was the left side tooth, would have an easier time cutting through the wood. I think that's actually might have been what happened, and which would explain the saw going to the right. I've been thinking about this, but we're going to do a test, and it's probably going to be the opposites of what we saw previously. And we're still going to do it though, because this stuff is interesting and it's cool. You know what I mean? Let's do the interesting stuff, and I find it interesting. So yeah, we're going to find out for certain what's going on here. And I think that's what's going on now. I think because I modified the right side cutters to help clear chips, it made it easier for the left side cutter to cut the wood, and that's why the saw went to the right. I think that's what actually went down. And I think by doing a test in testing the sharpness of the tooth, on which side's sharper, how that would cause the turn, I think that, because it's still a, what would you call it, a lesson to be learned or whatever, but for how it would relate to that other chain we're modifying, I don't think it's going to be an accurate representation. So we're going to see how that does. I'm actually getting ready to put the bar and chain on the saw right now and get it ready to start making that test. So that's actually probably where I'm going to end here tonight, is just get that bar and chain set up and then go in and sit down and relax a little bit. It was well, today's Saturday, and it'll probably be a few days until you see this video, but this is kind of what I've done today. Not a whole lot of saw work, a lot of thinking and talking and stuff. And I mean, I spent most of the time today that I was working on that Dolmar. I ported it up. I did the combustion chamber work about a week or two ago, and then today I went ahead and did all the grinding. I got the squish sitting at 25 thousandths. and put it together and got it running. Hopefully it's just an air leak that, once I get all those parts, I think I'm just going to go ahead and replace the carburetor, the boots, the little mount thingamajiggy, you know what I mean, that mount that holds the cable and all that stuff. I think I'm going to replace that, the elbow, all of it. I think I'm just going to replace it all. It's just the wrong combination of parts for me to get to the final, result, finished product that I'm looking for. So probably going to be a little bit yet till we see cutting on that saw. I just need to replace those parts and stuff. And I sure hope it is an air leak, because it definitely does not seem to run as good now as what it did before. So yeah, we'll see how this progresses. But last time I did push it a bit harder than what I did this time. So we'll see how this develops. So, all right, we'll catch you later.